Have you ever considered entering an illustration competition? Which competitions are the best ones to go for? How would you go about submitting work? I answer this and more in today's episode. Hey guys, how's it going? My name is Tom Froese. I'm an illustrator and designer in Vancouver, British Columbia, and this is my vidcast where I answer your questions about illustration. My goal for this vidcast is to offer you insights and inspiration that help you become a better illustrator. So if you're new here, welcome. Thank you very much for joining. And just a small note about how things usually work here is that I often start off with news and chit chat, and then I answer the question that is in the description of this video, which is probably how you found this, a little later on. And what I do is I leave a little link in the show notes that you can click that can skip past all the nonsense and get you right to the question. Today, I actually don't have any chit chat to give you in news. I'm just going to jump right to the question of this episode because I spent a long time making a fuller video and then none of it was really working out. My brain is really dead this week for some reason. My sleep app is telling me that I'm not getting a ton of good quality sleep. So anyway, I'm just going to jump right to the question. So here we go. This question comes from my friend Amber Lynn, and she asks about entering illustration competitions. So this is her question. I'm interested in learning more about contests. Can you talk about how to select and how to enter contests? Also, what are some great publications if you want to keep up with more of a who's who in illustration? So I'm going to focus on the first part of this question to start. So the question is, what illustration competitions are worth entering, essentially? And for me, I think that is the big question. There are lots and lots of illustration competitions out there. They are not all equal. I'm a little bit skeptical of a lot of competitions, to be honest. I see them pop up more and more every year. And if you look at how much it costs to enter a submission and the fact that a lot of these end up just as online kind of galleries, I think that these are rackets, essentially. They're meant to make money. In the spirit of my whole philosophy of limiting options, because options are overwhelming and they produce anxiety, I've kind of whittled down for myself the amount of competitions that I enter down to 3. And the 3 that matter to me are 3x3, Society of Illustrators, and Communication Arts Illustration Annual. Why do these matter to me? Well, 3x3, I find that work is very high caliber. I find the book itself to be well designed, and I feel like it's relevant to the illustration and design industries. I also think that 3x3 does a good job of straddling kind of traditional, old school illustration and more contemporary, let's say, designy illustration. Moving on to Society of Illustrators. Society of Illustrators is kind of the creme de la creme for your traditional illustrator. I think that they're based in New York. They've been around a long time, very old school. But the caliber of work that gets entered into SOI and the kind of illustrators that win are really top notch. And I feel like a lot of picture book illustrators place in this. Caldecott Honor Award level illustration gets entered, submitted, placed, won. Like I said, my brain's not working a whole lot today. But I just find that Society of Illustrators, the caliber of illustration is so high, like ridiculously high. And it's actually very much out of the category of the kind of illustration that I typically do, which is like an additional challenge to me. So I do submit to Society of Illustrators every now and then when I feel like maybe I have a chance. So finally, Communication Arts. This has been my kind of go-to competition. I've entered stuff into their design annual, into their illustration annual. What I like mostly about commercial arts, aside from the high caliber of work, is that they straddle the design and illustration world really nicely. And when you're getting your illustration published in a magazine, you do want other illustrators to see it, of course, but who you really want to see it are designers, art directors, creative directors, design studios, because these are the people, not illustrators, who are going to hire you to do illustration. Another thing I like about communication arts is they really kind of, I think they push more of the contemporary kind of work. I find that compared to Society of Illustrators, which is more old school and traditional, the kind of art that I see in communication arts is much more fresh and modern and graphic. And so yeah, I think, like, just to kind of quickly break down like this old school is in traditional illustration tends to be more arty, almost more painterly, very figurative, sometimes very weighty and serious feeling, and I'm being very general. And then more contemporary illustration, I think, is more buoyant, it's lighter, brighter colors, it's poppier, it's flatter, and more whimsical. There's just there's maybe more abstraction. And this is, again, a very broad generalization. I think you'll see a lot of both of those kinds of things in all of the competitions, but you just kind of get this feeling that the tastes and preferences of the people operating these competitions, the judges, are going to be a little bit biased toward more old school or more contemporary, depending on where you enter. I'll just say finally, with communication arts, I feel like they really have the top level leaders, top industry leaders, both entering the competition and also judging the competition. And this must be the same for all of them. And I'm going to get a little bit more about what I look for in these illustration competitions in terms of what I feel like gives them credibility. So why do these illustration competitions matter? And kind of what sets them apart from the rest? Or put it in another way, what do I look for in an illustration competition? I've talked a lot about the caliber of work, so that's just really the first thing you want to see. Like, when I'm entering my work into this competition, like who am I grouped in with? Like if you're entering a race and you're sort of a really fast runner and you get put in the back corral at the start of the race with the slow runners, you're just going to blast through them and you're going to stand out, and you're not even going to feel that good about yourself because you already knew you could run faster. And I think you want to look for an illustration competition that gives you that sense of challenge, that the caliber of work is at least at the level you're at, hopefully higher, such that if you were to place or get an award from this competition, you'd feel good about it. You don't want to join the t-ball game down the street and hit homers against little 5-year-olds, and you're a 30-year-old highly fit adult. To belabor the point, I think another thing that I look for in a competition is relevance to the industry, and all of the ones that I've just listed are definitely relevant in both the illustration agency and the design agency. You want to steer away from any newer illustration competition that doesn't seem to really have its foot in the door into the industry yet. And you can quickly kind of find that out just by kind of digging in, looking at the work, seeing if you recognize any of the names of artists that have submitted before, that have placed. And I know that's a little bit elitist of me, but I do look for that in a competition. And this kind of goes into my next point. You want to find a competition that's long-standing, it's tried, tested, and true. And all of these competitions that I've already mentioned, they've been around a long time. And especially communication arts, I think they're 6 years old this year. And Society of Illustrators, I have no idea how old they are. They must be around the same age. And yeah, they've been around a long time, and people know the names. They're not going anywhere. They have credibility. Again, I've talked about this final point. When I look in these publications, like the annuals that come from these awards competitions, the annual is usually like the book that actually has the winning entries in it. I recognize a lot of the names in it, the artists that I admire, that I'm following, that I aspire to be like in some ways. They are in these annuals. I know that they're entering, as opposed to maybe some more regional or newer or wonky competitions. I probably don't recognize very many people, or perhaps they have an international audience that I'm just not aware of. There is one final thing that I almost left out, which is the design of the actual publication. I find that some illustration awards annuals are very noisy, they're filled with ads, especially those like really annoying like hard paper samples that kind of break up the book and interrupt your experience of like just turning the pages. I actually don't know what Society of Illustrators printed annual actually looks like. For me, for them, they have this a gallery show where they actually hang the work in the New York Gallery. And for me, that's the attractive thing about Society of Illustrators. But with 3x3 and Communication Arts, they make beautiful annuals. 3x3 is focused almost entirely on the illustration. There's no additional articles or anything like that. So it's this beautiful just record of some of the best illustrations from the year, particularly in America. And then Communication Arts also, I think it shows the work really well. There's not a lot of distracting elements. I don't think I've seen a paper ad in their annual ever. What I like about Communication Arts is they actually include like extra articles by industry leaders and include studio tours and have a little bit extra, but it all kind of works together to build up the top level illustration and illustrators working today. And I think that's really significant. So let's talk about why you would want to enter an illustration competition in the first place. So a lot of people have this impression like entering an awards competition is just about building up your ego. It's all about just showing off or something like that. And maybe some people do that, but personally, the reason I enter an illustration competition is to position myself as a top tier proven illustrator. I'm not saying that I view myself in this way all the time or I go around telling people how top tier I am, but if I can place or get an award in one of these annuals, it positions me from someone else's perspective as one of these top level illustrators. And I think that's a very legitimate reason to enter an awards competition. For me, I actually like, if I have any kind of advertising budget, I spend most of it on these competitions as opposed to getting myself into like illustration directories. And that's something I can talk about some other time. For me, to pay to have my work in an illustration directory is way less impressive than having my illustration chosen by a jury to be placed in their annual. Do you know what I'm saying? Having your work in an annual that other illustrators and hopefully art directors, designers, creative directors are looking at, your work is in there. It's kind of like front row seat access to these people who will eventually hire you to work for them. And I find that, like, just turning quickly back to the directories of illustration, I have put my work in them before, but really they're really fat books. Like almost anyone it seems can put their illustration in. The bar is pretty low compared to illustration competitions, and you just really get lost in the mix. And so this is a reason why I enter. I feel like by having my illustration permanently in this record, this archive of award-winning illustrators, is just really good business and a form of advertising. So now let's talk about how to enter an illustration competition. I think there's a level of strategy you want to employ, but also just having some common sense. So let's kind of go through what I do when I'm about to enter my illustration into a competition. The very first thing I do is actually study the annuals. I look at the most recent annuals from the year before, maybe 2 years before, and I just look at what people have submitted and what has placed. And I try and get a sense of what makes an award-winning illustration. Is it just the craft? Is it the concept? Is it the client? These are all things that probably vary from annual to annual, from competition to competition, but you can really get a sense actually within each competition what the judges typically tend to look for. So you also just want to look at the kind of work they have and compare it to yours and say, like, do I fit in with this bunch? Does my work feel like it kind of fits within this category, but it's different enough to actually stand out? You want to find that balance, and you want to just kind of be realistic with yourself. Do I have a shot at this? I think an even more complex detail is that any given illustrator probably has multiple projects they've done all year, and they're wondering, what of my own work should I submit to which of these competitions? Again, this part of this decision process is looking at what other people have submitted, so you can say, well, I think some of my work, based on what I've seen them choose in previous years, such and such of my work will actually fit in better than other stuff. I feel like the competitions typically look for a balance of concept and craft. So the illustration isn't just like a fun, chipper illustration without any concept, even if it's well done. And it's not just like a highly conceptual image that has no real illustration craft or value to it. So you want to have this balance of something that has gravitas, it has some kind of significance, whether culturally or symbolically, or it's just really clever in how it's done. And then in terms of craft, it's something that is very well done and kind of obviously attracts eyes. You probably want to look at your work and ask, like, which of it is really fresh and bold and will really stand out. Just because it stands out doesn't mean that it's going to win, but you want to look for your most original, most innovative work. I feel like that always has the best chance. In terms of how much to submit, the more you can submit, I guess, the better your chances. It's like buying more lottery tickets. For me, because I consider this part of my advertising, I enter as many as I think are good enough that I can also afford. So I think with the last communication arts, my spend was over $300 or $400. And that's not chump change. That's a lot of money to throw at something that you may or may not actually see anything from. In terms of what to actually submit, you want to, because these are illustration annuals, you don't want to submit any images that show more than just illustration. It needs to stand on its own. I'll just use an example. A few years ago, illustrated what I thought was a really great illustration for a beer label, and that illustration and the artwork was then applied to t-shirts and mugs and totes and all kinds of fun stuff. And I thought because of this, it somehow gave my work more credibility. And when I submitted it, I didn't even get an honorable mention, or I wasn't a runner-up or anything like that. And who knows, maybe my reasons have nothing to do with it. But I feel like what you want to do is make it all about the image. Does the image make a really good award-winning illustration? And in that sense, you're submitting just the digital file of the artwork. It doesn't matter if it appeared in a magazine. You certainly don't need to submit your illustration in a mock-up unless your work is in a three-dimensional context. So an example is a mural. If you've done a mural illustration, especially if you've hand painted it, of course you have to submit a photo of that. There's no pure illustration file. But let's just say you did a digital illustration that became a mural, and that was the case for one of the pieces that I have entered and won an award for, where I did a bunch of illustrations that ended up as a huge mural in a grocery store. I showed a picture of what those looked like in the grocery store. It was a good quality photo taken by the design agency that hired me, and it showed those illustrations in context, just to show their importance in their context. And that's when you want to actually take a photo and show that rather than just the pure illustration. But the illustration itself has to be able to stand on its own too. So you want to take that illustration and also include it in your submission. Read and follow the instructions very carefully. Every illustration competition has a very specific set of instructions that you have to follow. Some of their forms are easier to use than others. Some of them look like they were designed in 1997. They haven't updated since. But you have to kind of play ball their way. So read their instructions. Make sure you submit work that, for instance, the images usually have to be quite small, like 1024 by 768, which today is puny. But again, this limitation of sending a very small image, I think, is deliberate. This is especially in the part of commercial arts, is that your illustration should be easily read at this kind of thumbnail level. And I think it actually proves the visual success of your image if it reads well at a small size. Don't try and send a larger file. I would say send the best files you have. If they're interested in your work, they're definitely going to ask you for higher res photos that they're going to need to put in the printed publication anyway. You want to make sure that you've included all the files, that your spelling is correct, you've entered things in all the fields, there's no missing fields. All those things really matter because it's an illustration competition, and they want you to take it seriously. So when you're kind of going through the submission form for a competition, you might find that they'll let you submit more than one image per submission. And in such a case, you want to be strategic about what image is seen first. So you can assume that the first image in the set will be seen first by whoever is judging your submission. So I would just say be mindful of that. Show them the thing that will grab their attention first, and they'll want to see more. And of course, that's a little bit of a guessing game, but it's something to be mindful of. So again, I think I would just emphasize when choosing your work what to submit, be as objective as possible. Of course, include other people, especially if you know anyone who's a designer or a fellow creative who can give you that level of feedback that you're looking for. Be objective. Does the image hold up? Or are you more impressed by how it was used or who the client is? I think for illustration competitions, who the client was and whether your illustration ended up on millions of screens or tons of billboards in New York City or whatever, it doesn't matter. It matters, does the illustration hold up? And that's really what you're looking for when you're entering these things into a competition. You're being judged on the image, not on how the image was used. That's a design competition, and that's a whole other video. So I think lastly, an important thing to consider that you might not have thought about is the category that you're submitting your entry to. So usually in a design competition, they have categories like advertising, posters, self-promotion, unpublished, for sale, stuff like that. My most recent award submission that won an award with Communication Arts was my Glenn Gould poster, right back there. This was submitted into the for sale category because it's a poster for sale. And I'm not saying this is why I won, but the amount of entries in the for sale category in previous years are just fewer than, say, advertising or posters. And that means because there are fewer entries, I'm more likely, there's a higher chance of winning because I'm one of, say, 50 versus one of 500. And I don't know what the numbers are. I don't know how many people submit to for sale in that category, but I'm guessing that played some role in how this poster was able to be placed. And again, I don't want to undersell myself or underestimate the fact that it's a good poster and original and all that, but you can be strategic in that way. You can say, well, I have this piece that I could enter into any of these, 3 or 4 categories. Then you can say which of these categories has the least representation in the book, because like there may be 2 pages to the for sale category and then maybe like 13 pages given to the advertising category. You can look at that and use that as a way of strategizing what and how to submit your work. Anyway, this is hopefully helpful to anyone who's interested in submitting their work to competitions. I just want to say competitions aren't for everyone. I really feel like you need to have work that kind of fits within a certain category or a certain kind of illustration or certain set of preferences. And this is perhaps not the only reason why I haven't gotten any response from Society of Illustrators, but I do think it is a big reason is that my work probably doesn't fit in that category. Maybe I'll stop entering into Society of Illustrators. What I'm saying is just keep in mind, illustration competitions aren't for everyone. I know that there are top level illustrators who have entered into competitions who haven't won, and I don't think it's the be all end all in terms of validating you as an illustrator. I'll just kind of give you quite personally, like when I enter into competitions, just before I know that they're going to send out that email to the winners, I do experience some anxiety. If you're prone to anxiety, if you find it hard to deal with disappointment, stuff like that, I'm certainly not giving any sort of advice here, but entering competitions in that waiting period, trying to figure out, did you win, did you not? It can be grueling, it can be very hard on your heart. It certainly has been on mine. I actually posted a video just documenting in real time as I go to the one of the websites of the competitions and I look, I'm like, am I on the list? Am I on the list? And yeah, it does feel crappy when you don't win, and this is definitely a downside to illustration competitions. I think there's some things that can be improved in these things, like perhaps they can offer something back to people who haven't placed, some kind of portfolio review or some kind of feedback on what they actually thought about the work you did submit, what you could have improved on. I think I don't know where all the money goes for these competitions. They are very expensive. I'm sure a lot of it goes to printing and shipping, trophies and the books themselves. And of course, paying for the judges' time, hopefully. Yeah, I feel like illustration competitions they don't have to, no, they're responsible simply for being a competition. I think that's enough. But it would be nice if they supported all people who submitted work. I think that would honor everybody a little bit more as humans. And maybe we'll see more of that in the future. Here's hoping. Okay, so the final part of the question from Amber Lynn was just, are there some great publications if you want to keep up with more of a who's who in illustration? So really this is like what kind of magazines or books are out there that kind of showcase the best talent today. I'm a little behind the game in terms of knowing what's actually like in terms of magazines and stuff like that. I've mentioned these illustration annuals. These are a great way of actually answering that question to some degree. Great Discontent is a great illustration design related lifestyle magazine. I know they have a lot of great articles and feature really top-notch talent. For a while, this magazine I don't think has made a comeback, but Wrapped was a super amazing illustration-oriented magazine. Beautiful work, and they even included wrapping paper in the magazine that was designed by 4 illustrators that they feature in that respective issue. Wrapped magazine. Maybe they have some back issues available. Hopefully they're doing stuff today. But that was a great illustration magazine. But otherwise, I feel like I'm kind of behind the times in terms of what magazines are out there. I look to Instagram. I like to see what's happening actually in the real actual commercial world. So who's Apple featuring in their stores, on their walls, or on some of their screen grabs and stuff that they have in their ads or on their website. I look at other top brands, Warby Parker, who's making murals for them. Your favorite coffee shop that's doing something really cool and they've incorporated some kind of beautiful mural. Chances are they've hired a really top-notch illustrator that's more local to you. Look them up, and what you can do if you really want to see who's who, like who are the illustrators you admire following. So, find someone whose illustration you love, go to their Instagram, check out who they follow or what images they're liking. It's not because your taste should be their taste, but if you look up to them as someone who has a similar taste to you, they're going to hopefully be connected to some artists that you've never heard of before, and that can be an excellent way into discovery. So I'm going to think about that one a little bit more, and I hopefully will be able to have a better answer should someone want to know where to look for new talent in the future. But meanwhile, illustration competitions, the ones that I've mentioned, Society of Illustrators, 3x3, Communication Arts, amazing repositories of some of today's best talent. I haven't mentioned more internationally, there is AOI, they're more European World Illustration Awards, one of the more relevant, long-standing, good awards competitions out there. For Canadians, there's Applied Arts. They have their illustration annual, they have photography, they have design annual. I have mixed feelings about Applied Arts. I kind of like what they're doing, but they're one of those books that I feel like is very dense and the illustration doesn't really stand out. This is just my kind of critical review of Applied Arts, but they are an industry leader in the kind of design and illustration annual, so you might want to look into that. I think that's it for now. Hopefully I've given you some helpful tips, and thanks everyone for watching. If you like this video, please give it a like, and if you love this channel, if you love me, hit that subscribe button and you'll be notified by email every time a new video launches. And if you like being notified on your devices, you can hit that little bell and that gives you a notification right on your smartphone. Guys, every sub is like a hot water bottle keeping me warm in this cold, cold world of illustration and design competitions. Okay, that's it from me. Hope you guys have a great weekend or week or whatever time of the week it is that you happen to be watching this video, and the future part. Hope you guys have a good next few days. Keep making good work. Keep making great work. Okay, that's it. Okay, that's it from me. Okay, that's it from me. Hope you guys have a great week, and I'll catch you in the next episode. Meantime, keep making great work and keep asking great questions.